All right. Brian is fantastic, and we're going to go from one fantastic guest to another. The one, the only Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on, well, obviously on Twitter, but also on Boosty, Boosty. Check him out at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda or under the name just Mark Sleboda. How you doing, Mark?
Jamaro, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show, and I'm alive. How are you?
I am doing okay. I am glad that you are. You could join me. Um, so the Alaska Summit, the Alaska Summit. So it sounds like Trump, Putin has come to some kind of agreement, whatever that agreement is. I don't know what it is. Like normal, Western media is talking to itself about the agreement. The Russians are more circumspect, haven't necessarily mentioned as normal. Zelensky has been summoned to the White House. He is bringing a band of buffoons and morons and degenerates with him, just kind of a circus. Trump pointed out, I'm talking to him first. You idiots, stay in your rooms. Apparently, Zelensky, when asked about this, had a conversation with media, and he said this in response to the Donald Trump call.
To me and I asked President Trump, Mr. President, why did you talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin before talking to me? And President Trump said he wanted to talk to the tallest one first and then the shortest. I was not happy about this. Then I told him that I want to create a European army. And then he asked me if it was an army of short little midgets like me. And I did not like that either. I asked President.
So obviously Zelensky didn't necessarily like the phone call. Axios said it was a tense, complicated phone call. Trump was being very derisive in that call. Zelensky has a point. Give me a point. Give me your take on the Alaska meeting. And obviously that's not. Obviously that's not real, right?
Yeah. But so I mean, there is some truth to it because Zelensky is arriving today in Washington with an army of geopolitical midgets, the leaders of Europe, the seven little dwarves, to defend him, to babysit him and hold him his hands while he meets with Trump. Yeah, so there is that. Yeah. So, I mean, when talking about Alaska, at the end of the day, I get really sleepy because I've gorged on so much nothing burger.
Really? Oh, you got to give me that. Okay, you got to give me that. Explain that, because I have a different take on this. But
yeah, I don't think anything happened in Alaska. I think for that we should be grateful. So first of all, Putin wasn't captured or killed, obviously, right? And while that was always an outside possibility, I don't know anyone who wasn't, on the Russian side who wasn't secretly, relieved and pleased when Putin, Trump, and everyone from the delegation touched back down on Russian territory, because, logic says that you're dealing with a nuclear superpower and a great power by any stretch of the terms at the very least, and that you don't do things like that. But after the decapitation strikes against Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah, and Trump gloating about his assassination of Soleimani during his first administration, and he re-gloating about that just last week, you can't rely on these people for the normal, bounds of statesmanship and diplomatic behavior.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Even if I said it myself, it was unlikely, but it's not something that can be discounted completely. Therefore, I was also relieved when Putin touched back down on Russian territory. But there was still a trap created there, right? A pressure trap. From the moment they met on the tarmac and were on a red carpet, and Trump had a B-2 Spirit bomber and F-35s do a low flyby over in some type of macho display that was intended to shake and intimidate or impress Putin. And Putin,
Wait a
of course,
minute. It's, let me interrupt on that. How do you know that was to intimidate as opposed to
what was it for? To showcase the high technological value of the F-35? Come on.
Okay.
Of
I'm just
course
saying there are
that
different
was-
ways of looking
Of
at
course,
that. But
that
okay,
was
fair
to
enough.
shake Putin, right? To impress upon him the military might of the United States. That's
And you
exactly
really think
what that was
Putin was going to
intended.
look at that and be like, "Oh my God, I'm so terrified."
Someone in the
that you
Trump
have a-
administration did. Maybe Trump himself. I mean, it didn't happen by accident, Jamarl.
No, I'm not saying it happened by accident. I'm saying that the interpretation of it is that this was to intimidate,
Of
as
course it
opposed
was.
to
What else would it
I'm
be there?
okay.
Celebratory?
Yeah,
They
red
could have
carpet.
done that with fireworks if they wanted. Come on.
Fair enough. But
It
keep going. Fair
obviously
enough.
didn't work. It didn't shake Putin in the slightest.
No, of
There
course.
was a brief attempt at of Trump exerting alpha dog dominance with his usual puerile handshake wrestling going on. And when Putin, who is a several degree black belt judo master, didn't so much as get taken off balance by a man who is considerably taller and has several degrees more mass than him, right? That didn't work either. And then ever after that, it was essentially we were left with what was obviously a bit of a starstruck Trump dealing with someone that at some level he obviously considers his idol for whatever reason that exists. It was like someone's idol lecturing a school child. That's the impression that came across to me. If we're going to go the body analyzing, psychoanalyzing route, which I think is pathetic, but we all engage in it to a certain degree, I guess. But it was a big pressure trap, right? I mean, even down to the banner logos, pursuing peace, right? That if Putin didn't agree to Trump's demands to end the war, to save his proxy Kiev regime on Russian terms, then he didn't want peace, right? I mean, that was the implied message there. And Russia didn't blink. They didn't blink to the pressure, right, that was applied to them in any fashion. And so they averted the trap. And if anything, Trump, obviously by the end of the summit, and the summit was obviously a complete failure. At the last minute, the one-on-one meeting was changed for a 3-on-3 meeting. After the 3-on-3 meeting, the 5-on-5 meeting was just dropped off, and we skipped lunch too. And we had a press conference with no questions, where Trump was obviously so deflated, right? He was even somehow convinced, or for whatever reason, it was decided to let Putin speak first, right? And that is unheard of, right? Usually, certainly the host country, and especially, the United States, their leader speaks first, but Putin was allowed to speak first. And Putin went on for about 8 minutes and laid out the usual Russian boilerplate, root causes and all of that, right? And he slathered on a few, face-saving licks to the wounds of Trump there. And Trump, in very deflated, for him, desultory terms, made noises for about 3 minutes, and that was it. And they both left, and there was no lunch. There was no anything else. Everything was cut short. What was supposed to be 7 or 8 hours was truncated down to a fraction of that length, and they went their separate ways. And the only result out of it is that, at least temporarily, Trump is now switched to mouthing Russia's line that, when he demanded a ceasefire and Putin told him no and hell no, and go pound sand, no matter what you do, and we're not scared of your tariffs because we know China and India got our back. Trump is now, all right, well, if we got to end this thing, then it's got to be more on Russian terms. So they've dropped the demands for a ceasefire. Now, it has to be said, all of this has done before. All that was essentially done was Trump was deflated and dialed back like a clock to where he was several months ago. Because at one point previously, after a phone call with Putin, he had dropped the demands for a ceasefire, right? And started talking about a permanent peace plan. And then, of course, he was talked to by his own people, by the people in his administration, by the deep state, by the Europeans, like a slavering horde, and Zelensky. And then Trump was yelling for a ceasefire, and threatening sanctions and everything else. Now we've just had a rewind, and now we're going to go through the whole process again, because Zelensky and that horde of European zombies leaders are going to be in the White House today, browbeating Trump, they will be rolling over and being obsequious, but in a way that demands proper behavior of their master, right? That is what we'll see. So no matter what, right? Nothing. The Kiev regime and the Europeans won't agree to anything, right, of this, none of this, right? I mean, they've put out their counter proposal, which is like the exact opposite and demanding reparations from Russia, right? So there's a complete impasse, right? Trump does not have the leverage to force Russia to peace on U.S. terms, and he does not have the ability to coerce Kiev and the Europeans and the majority of the government of his own country to make concessions, at least towards Russian terms. So that's it. The war goes on. I mean, that's why I say nothing, Berger. Nothing. We have a temporary change in Trump's rhetoric, but that'll be beat out of him soon enough. And then we'll be back to, toothless sanctions threats and supplying arms through the Europeans, and the war will go on. I don't know any other way really to interpret.
It is very rare that I disagree with you, Mark.
Okay.
I cannot disagree with you
so you have gotten wind then, I take it, of the secret 5D agreement that was hashed between Putin and Trump.
No,
and they're both saying nothing about, right? And there's no leaks about, right? But they've both got a secret plan, right, to force the Europeans and the Kiev regime to peace on Russian terms.
No,
right?
That's not what I think. No, just to be clear, that's not what I think. What I think is, I think you've laid it out perfectly up to a point. The fact that Donald Trump, where it was beat out of him, where he's like, all right, only way to make this work is on Russian terms. I think the difference is, and the thing that changed in the context of this is, they are about to lose Donbass in several months. It is humiliating for Trump to have a massive collapse in the way that I think, in his mind, it's taking place. And between having that collapse and the coming to terms, even if it's Russian terms, he would rather try to save face and sell it on Russian terms. That's what I think. The European, as you point out, the gang of degenerates, those people are delusional. And they're coming here as a carnival to try to convince Trump of something, regardless of the reality of the things that are taking place on the ground. That is the only difference and the reason why I think this is taking place in the way that it's taking place. I don't think Trump, all things being equal, if they were winning, wouldn't press an advantage. They would. But as you point out, Putin came here. These are my demands. Take it or leave it. Obviously, he wasn't going to push Putin on this. Putin was very clear what he wanted. He had core demands. Trump either accepted or he didn't. And between accepting or allowing failure on the battlefield, when he can't pass secondary sanctions or tariffs on India and China because of the reverberation effects. You have nothing else.
On Italy too. I must say.
I know. Leave Maloney alone. Maloney is okay. I'm not going to say a bad word about Maloney. I like Maloney. It has nothing to do with our policies. But I guess my point is this: he's stuck. He's in a box. What do I do in this situation? How do I escalate against Russia? Well, I can't escalate against Russia. How do I escalate against its neighbors? Well, I can't really do that against India and China because it's going to have reverberation effects back on the US. And yet, I have so much bluster. How do I get out of this? Oh, I know. Let's have a meeting. Oh, we've come to an agreement. Okay, now we're going to bring Zelensky, and I'm going to browbeat Zelensky to accept this agreement as opposed to complete failure. Minsk 1 and 2 was the same way, right? Where you had a Ukrainian collapse that was going to take place. It was going to be humiliating for Europe. Let's come to an agreement. Let's talk to Angela Merkel. We're going to talk, and we're going to come to some kind of deal.
But Putin,
this is not the same. This is not unfolding in a similar fashion. Give me your
Putin
take,
has
'cause I
not
could be
agreed
wrong.
to Minsk 3. Yeah, Putin has not agreed to Minsk 3, right? I mean, that's obvious.
No,
That
of course
was
not.
the trap, right? And he didn't.
By the way,
And
which I
what
don't
else-
think he will.
Yeah. And what else can Trump do? Trump can't do anything else, right? He can't force his own bipartisan Congress, right? His own deep state, his own many of the people in his own administration to accept Russian terms. He
Agreed.
can't. I mean, much less the Europeans and the Kiev regime. He can mouth these words for a while, but he'll be dialed back and brought back under control, brought back onto the reservation. He can't do anything, right? He'll try to fob it off again. Oh, it's not my war. It never would have happened. And Putin, Putin is an absolute expert at playing Trump like a fiddle. Let's be honest about that, right? I mean, everyone tries to manipulate Trump. Trump practically demands that everyone try to manipulate him, right? Whether we're talking foreign leaders, the people in his own administration, everyone, right? Everyone, because that's what he sets up. I am the God Emperor of mankind, and everyone needs to come to my court and pay me court, right? I mean, that's the game. He creates that situation. So everyone, right? As John Bolton admitted within his own administration from the first time, his allies, his enemies, everyone tries to manipulate him. But Putin simply does it better than anyone else. In part, I guess, because Trump at some deep-rooted psychological level has more respect and deference for Putin than anyone else. Maybe because Putin does stand so strong. Well, Mark Rudo, rolls over and shows Trump his belly and still tries to get his way. He doesn't have contempt for them the way, for Putin the way he does for them. I don't want to get into any further, try to get any further into Trump's mind. That's not a winning game for anyone. But that much at least is obvious. But he's just still in a box. He can't agree to Russian terms, right? He can't win the conflict, right? So what's left but to continue, right? He'll try to rebrand things. Again, he won't be giving the Kiev regime arms. The Europeans will just be buying weapons, right? But that still won't change anything because the U.S. doesn't have the type and the quantity of the arms that are necessary. And at this point, no amount of arms would save the Kiev regime with their manpower problem, with their manpower woes. They can continue fighting for a long time in a resistance fashion, I believe, right? It will eventually devolve down into guerrilla war and other things. But that Ukraine's a big country. A military occupation of Ukraine, which is ultimately what Russia is going to be forced to do, is going to take a really long amount of time and a lot of resources for Russia. It's a victory, but only in the sense that it is a less bad outcome than the alternative. It is still a horrible thing for Russia to have to do. For what they have to put into it, what it's going to cost them. That's why, it's an ugly victory. There are no good victories here. There's no, golden path that leads to the utopia outcome. It doesn't exist. So, and Trump can't do anything to stop it, but he also can't stop trying to make it as costly to Russia as possible. He can't get out of that hole. He can't win, but he can't let Putin win, at least not without greater cost either. So and the war continues. That's it. For me, on a personal level, the single best moment of the Alaska Summit was the swagger of Mr. Niet himself, Sergei Lavrov, the master of diplomacy, as he walked into the facilities with an SSSR sweatshirt on.
Yeah.
And the Western media's just collective jaws just dropped, first in shock and then opened again in outrage, right? And there's even a clip going around, and it might be honest, where it might be real. It's hard to tell these days. Where sitting down with the interpreter for the photo shoot, Putin was asked about it, and someone said to Lavrov right there, "I like your sweatshirt," and it was explained to them through the translator, and Putin just gave a sardonic look at Lavrov, and then turned to the Americans and said, "He's an imperialist." A little joke. That to me, that was. By the way, that sweatshirt is on sale for was on sale for only the equivalent of about $25 US on Russia's online outlet Wildberries, which is kind of like Amazon.
Like Amazon, yeah.
And of course, it's already sold out for months into the future now, right? You cannot get that sweatshirt. They're going to be making Chinese knockoffs of that sweatshirt, right? I don't know where it's actually made. Maybe they don't need Chinese knockoffs, right? But anyway, that to me was, I mean, the whole thing is about this entire thing was resulted in practically nothing in long range terms, right? It's a temporary change in rhetoric that is of course going to be reversed because nothing can come out of it, right? So nothing ultimately is going to happen. My big question was, were you entertained? Because that's all you're going to get out of it, right? Were you entertained, right? Is that not why you were here, to be entertained? And I was mildly entertained. So I guess in those terms, it was at least only because of Lavrov and a few other choice events, like Russian journalists being forced to live in a third world country.
Yeah, that was so screwed up. That was so screwed up.
Dmitriev finding a bear just outside the facilities and considering that a good symbol, right? Everything, right? The Russians, I mean, I think you could definitely chalk them up a tactical victory, right? They didn't succumb to the pressure trap at all. They restated their terms for the upteenth time. They obviously deflated Trump. They didn't bow to his demands, and he was. I mean, when have you ever seen him so depressed as he was during that press briefer, right? I mean, he was just deflated. It was like someone poked that big orange balloon, and the air was rushing out of it. So that's my take on events. I know there's people out there that believes that some secret plan was agreed to by Trump and Putin. I'm not one of those people. I think it's a lot more simple than that. Russia presented their terms. Trump is in a bad position, so he's at least made a nod toward Russian terms and tries to sell that to the Europeans in Kiev, and that will of course be completely rejected today. That might be happening now, sometime today, and then that's it. The war continues. And
you don't accept that this is a contact. I mean, look at the way Trump is looking at him. Trump doesn't even look at his wife like that.
Yeah, I agree. But ultimately, that doesn't matter. Trump doesn't actually have that much power, right? He's allowed a certain amount of leash, right? He's allowed his say. He'll talk, ceasefire, but he doesn't have that much power. It's the institutions of the U.S. It's a bipartisan congressional consensus. It's the deep state. It's the neocons which is the majority in his own administration.
And
they're all going to. They just have to bring him back onto the ranch.
And you completely discount the capability of Trump saying, "I'm out."
Yes.
Look, you have said yourself that Trump has complete contempt for the gang of morons that have in tow with Zelensky, has complete contempt for Zelensky himself.
For the Europeans.
For the Europeans, who's probably wanted to walk because he wanted to pivot to Asia, has, this the buzzword for it is this kind of delegation of resources, where it's like, look, we've been trying to pivot to Asia, going all the way back to Obama. What's this, 20 years, 2016? We haven't been able to do it. We want to division.
Every president gets caught up in the Middle East.
Yes, we want to hand it over to the Europeans, and we want to be out. These guys are screaming for daddy. We want out. And as J.D. Vance said, you can buy our weapons, but we don't want any part of this. He has a base that will back him on this. And I would even wager to you the majority of the country will back him on this. How is walking not on the table? The moment that he tells Europeans,
because he will be painted as the president who surrendered Ukraine to Russia.
But that is better than being painted as a president who lost Ukraine.
He could drag it out for another few years and punt it to the next president.
Oh God, I hope that's not the case, Mark. You might be right. Look, you could be entirely correct. You could be entirely correct. I just hope that's not the case. That would suck.
There's still 100 or 200,000 18 to 25-year-old young men in Ukraine that can be drafted to buy Trump that time.
Yeah, and a good 80% is going to try to run.
No,
I mean, you have
undoubtedly, right? I mean, that number's already deflated for accounting for at least half of them escaping the country in the process, by the way.
Yeah.
That's already taken that into account. Yeah.
It just seems
I know you there is a natural desire to want to hope for a different outcome to this. I just don't think it's realistic. I would be happy to be wrong if it's not, but that's the way I see it. And I have to say, I've been listening to other people, right? I've listened to many other alternate views on this, but at the end of the day, right, I know who you just talked to before me. And the other person that I pay a special weight to what they say is John Mearsheimer. And neither one of them have any divergence from the picture I just painted. Well, Brian goes even a little bit further than I do and says this is all a pantomime. And the Europeans are just going through the motions, right? And there's no real division at all between the Americans and the Europeans, which, could be true at some level, right? But otherwise, I mean, the important thing is the outcome. The war continues, and Russia has to win it on the battlefield.
Well, Brian was slightly different. Brian, I mean, I think, okay, you would have to talk to Brian. I'll say it that way. But it sounded like Brian's take was kind of, there's like, effectively, Europe has a point of view that the Americans give it, that some of them may be true believers, like Kalis or whatever, but some of the other ones are effectively, we are following U.S. dictates, even to the degree that it damages Europe. But Donald Trump is in a fix, as you point out. They are about to have a massive military defeat, and between that military defeat and them having a tactic withdrawal, they would take the tactic withdrawal and offer something, whether or not Europe will accept it or not will depend upon what the U.S. ultimately
that's a tactical withdrawal is a logical choice. I simply don't believe that they can make that logical choice. I don't think that the institutions within the U.S., right, the media, the bipartisan congressional consensus, Lindsey Graham screaming about bone-crushing sanctions again, right, because that was in the last few hours. I mean, Lindsey Graham is a piece of work, man. I posted a video of him on my own show at the end of last week saying that God demands that the U.S. support the Israeli genocide, I guess, in Israel, and that if the U.S. doesn't, then God will punish the U.S. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is saying that God has directed him to secure a greater Israel. I mean, they're like bookends. Right, across this book of Zionism and genocide. It's
I love how God has a point of view on this stuff.
He always does, doesn't he?
God is a take. All right,
God is what we make of him, which is, considering what humanity is, then that man, he's probably a real sadistic